Hi, I'm Kyle.
And I'm Trevor, and welcome to Catching Up on Cinema. If you're not familiar with the program, Catching Up on Cinema is a podcast wherein Kyle and I take turns introducing one another to films, and in this way, we help one another to catch up on our cinema. This month, the month of August 2019, is Anime August here at Catching Up on Cinema. Essentially, the idea this month is that Kyle was kind enough to hand me the keys to the programming castle this month. So I get to make all the selections for the movies we're watching for the entire month. And by the title, you can obviously tell we're watching nothing but anime. So last week, we covered the OVA series, Part 1 and Part 2 of Otaku no Video, the Gainax animation from 1991. And today, we're going to be talking about Ghost in the Shell, Mamoru Oshii's 1995 sci-fi classic. This is a massively influential film and manga series. Countless references can be found in Hollywood and elsewhere around the world. It's a big fucking deal. Honestly, it's not a personal favorite of mine. That's going to be a theme with a lot of the programming choices this month. I'm not so much picking these movies based on like my personal relationship to them. More so, I'm picking them for like their educational value, I guess. Because Kyle doesn't have much of a background with anime, and I'm basically trying to give him a good, solid introduction to what it has to offer, especially from my own perspective. That being of a 30-something reformed anime fan, someone who's been out of the game for about 10 years. So most of the choices are going to be firmly in the 80s and 90s as opposed to like the 2000s and beyond. And this being 1995, this was kind of towards the height of my interest in the medium. But yeah, Kyle, right out the gate, how'd you feel about this one?
I actually really like this one. I think that I like Ninja Scroll a little bit better. But
Well, it is fucking Ninja Scroll.
yeah, but yeah, visually, this is great to look at. The story is coherent. I actually know what's happening as opposed to Akira. It's We'll get into it definitely, but I see a lot of echoes of the Matrix, a little bit of Blade Runner in here. Uh, yeah, I thought it was pretty good. If I'm gonna say for the genre, efficient use of nudity. Generally, that's not not really what they get at with the nudity in anime, but interesting use here.
Yeah, probably the major distinction is that it's not exploitative.
No,
I mean,
it's not.
it's present, but it's presented. I mean, the term male gaze, I guess, is something you'll hear a lot in a lot of film discussions, at least in the past few years. Um, Usually, that refers to the way things are framed, the way things are edited, the way things are presented to you, the audience. And male gaze refers to like presenting, say, like the female form in a way that's meant to be like lascivious or convey certain feelings or like instill certain feelings in male members of the audience, as filmed by a person of the male gender or whatever. This though, like the nudity it's kind of just there. It's just a
Yeah,
thing that happens, and oftentimes there's actually like a utility to it. Like there's typically a reason for it, and it's never presented in like a sexual manner for the most part. It's just nudity. It's almost like walking in on like an artist studio or something, and there's a model. It's just like you're not meant to be like seeing that and having a sexual response to it. It's there.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, this film is based on a manga. That actually the director of this film, again Mamoru Oshii. This is not his property. The original author of the manga is Masamune Shiro. He also did Appleseed and a few other pretty big name manga and anime. But their sensibilities are very different. As far as I know, Masamune Shiro is more like tongue-in-cheek-ish, and even his original character designs for the characters in this film are a bit more cheeky. Like the central character Motoko, Kusanagi, she's a her character design is more distinctly feminine and like, softer cheeks, like poutier lips, all that business. But Mamoru Oshii has very different sensibilities from the original author. So I actually have zero background with the franchise on the whole. My entire background with Ghost in the Shell consists of this film and the sequel. So there are multiple TV series and a comic that go with this. So I don't know how true to the brand this film is, but I feel it stands on its own in a lot of ways. But Mamoru Oshii is a director that I've told you about a few different times. I probably didn't emphasize who he was or his significance, but for me, his style is unmistakable. He's sometimes criticized for being a animation director who probably shouldn't be working with animation, because I think you mentioned it off air that in a lot of ways this animation is shot, quote unquote, like a film.
Yeah.
Like you would do like on a physical set or in like actual space. Like
Very
the way
much
the
so.
camera's positioned, it's not super experimental with like where they place the camera. There's not a whole lot of intense camera movement. They're very judicious with their lighting and their shot placement and things like that, their compositions. And yeah, a lot of his movies, the runtime generally consists of people just having conversations. Like, he has action, he has violence in a lot of his movies, but the bulk of them are just like kind of normal people having kind of normal conversations. In fact, like one of the biggest tropes is what kind of dog was in this movie? Is that a basset hound?
There's a fucking dog. I didn't even see a dog.
Oh, god damn it, Kyle. Well, anyway, he has a thing for a specific breed of dog. I think it's a basset hound. So it's like a recurring image in a lot of his films. But another recurring thing that happens across many of his films is people having conversations in cars while not looking at each other. And that's not so much apparent in this movie. But point is, regardless of how much weight you put towards auteur theory, like how much stock you put into that concept, his films have a very distinct look and feel to them. It's entrancing. I don't know if his films are my favorite, but I do love the fact that I can put on any one of them and instantly know that he made it. And that seems to be a kind of a theme with a lot of the movies we cover. It seems to be something both you and I value in our film directors. But yeah, Kyle, did you have any other comments about the movie before we get into the plot?
No, that'll come up as we kind of work through the plot. So overall, this is more or less a futuristic cop story, and they're trying to track down this evil hacker, more or less, by the name of
Puppet Master.
Puppet Master, yes, Puppet Master. But yeah, we get the opening shots are like some like just excellent cityscapes. I love like the negative space in here. I love the attention to detail. But yeah, we get our protagonist, Major. Is that her name?
Yeah,
Major.
Motoko is her first name, but her rank is Major, and so if you want to call her that, I don't mind.
Major Motoko. Yeah, I looked up online. I'm like, what's her name? I didn't catch her name, and they're like, Major Motoko. But I guess in the comics she goes by Major.
Oh, see, again, I've never read the comic, so you might know some more of that than me.
See, I was trying to be cool. I'm like, oh, he's not gonna know that I know her name. And he's gonna be, oh wow, how'd you know it was Major? I'm like, you don't even know, nerd. Damn
it. Before we get into it though, Kyle, which version of this movie did you watch?
So I actually, you had mentioned like, do I have a way to stream this? And I looked up. I'm like, oh yeah, easily I can stream this. So I rented. It said, okay, this is Ghost in the Shell 1995. So I clicked on it, and it's like 2.0. I'm like, okay, well that's the only one on here, and it's animated for sure. I'm like, that must be it. And it got started, and I'm like, oh, okay, this looks about right. But then we get the shot of Major, and I'm like, oh, no, that's digital. Like, that's not what is supposed to be happening right now. So I found it on Vudu, not on Amazon. But Vudu had it. I'm like, okay, I started watching it. I'm like, okay, this is the correct one. So I did watch the original, not the 2.0.
Okay. Yeah, the reason why I bring it up is because the Blu-ray that I own for this movie has two different versions on the disc. One of which I have never actually watched because I can't stand the way it looks. So the movie we're talking about came out in 1995, and much like The Matrix, which would come out a few years later, the predominant color scheme is based in greens. And it has a wonderful look to it. It's largely hand-drawn animation. There are computer shots in there, but it's few and far between.
There's one
the technology.
There's one particular instance we'll get to. I have a question about, but we'll get there.
I think I know what you're talking about, but yeah, we'll get there for sure. But in 2008, this film was reissued. I don't know if it got a theatrical re-release. I want to say it did. But I think at the time, one of the Ghost in the Shell like anime television series, I think it was Standalone Complex, was in full swing, and so probably for like promotional synergy, they re-released the original film, but they doctored or like redid a lot of the animation digitally to give it a similar look and feel to the TV show that was airing in 2008, which is many years removed from 1995, including changing the predominant color palette to like a creamy goldish like rose gold kind of feel, and then plastering CGI over a lot of the glorious hand-drawn stuff. And I just can't stand the way it looks, even though the sad part is that the Blu-ray that I own only has the original 1995 film on it in a single definition. So I take watching that over watching the 1080p 2008 version, just because it's not what I remember and it just doesn't feel right to me.
Well, you'd lose the essence of anime by doing that if you're watching it. I want to say whitewashed, but
that's a different Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, I figured that's not that's not what you wanted me to get out of it. Was the
and it didn't occur to me until I sat down to rewatch it myself. I was like, oh shit, is Kyle watching 2.0? I mean, that would have made for an interesting conversation, because we would definitely have some instances where we'd both be pausing on the mic, going like, hang on. What
happened?
It's like Green. What? There's no green in this movie. What are you talking about?
Right.
But yeah, it needs to be said, the studio that animated this film, and in fact, the vast majority, if not all, of Mamoru Oshii's movies, production IG, they have a varied skill set, but one of their greatest gifts is realism and naturalistic movement. They have an amazing gift for rendering human beings that move like human beings. Like, sure, they can do flashy action scenes and stuff, but for the most part, they have a eye for detail that is truly exceptional, and their background paintings are top notch. Like top men.
Like you can
top men.
You can watch Akira and you can really appreciate like knowing how much time went into making it, and appreciate the cityscapes and the backgrounds in it. But here, like, this is on another level. Like I
mean, Japanese animation, that's actually like one of the things that they do best is background paintings. It's like one of the easiest things to overlook in terms of like craftsmanship. But it's almost akin to I mean, this is probably a Japanese thing, but it's akin to like the model makers for Godzilla movies.
Yeah.
Where it's one of the things that's easy, like the easiest thing to dismiss, to overlook. But the amount of love and effort that went into building all of those is just incredible. And it's the same with the background paintings.
I think that one of the things that makes movies rewatchable, some movies are just good because the narrative, like the story itself, is good to watch. Like The Princess Bride is just a fun one to watch. But there's other movies that are rewatchable because of their use of negative space. I'm gonna keep hitting the nail on the head. 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's the perfect example. I'm like, you can rewatch that because it's like watching photography. Like it just, there's one scene where before they go into space, they're in a room. In a meeting, and there's just this one shot where you're just like, oh my gosh, like it's perfect. It's hard to describe, but yeah, just going back and watching those scenes are worth the rewatch. And I could definitely see myself actually going back and rewatching this just to kind of look at it again.
Well, I mean, it helps that it's 83 minutes long, and
That is very helpful.
probably 7 to 8 minutes of it is just straight up montage, which it puts it in like maybe the Rocky IV league in terms of ratio of montage to actual storytelling in your film. But yeah, from an audio-visual standpoint, this film is truly amazing. Again, the story doesn't resonate with me as much as some others.
I like the story. But
I think the story is more relevant today, maybe, than it was in 1995.
Fair.
Honest.
I think that's fair.
And we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
On that note, I guess we should get to it. Like you said, we do open with a cityscape and stuff. Some of the renderings are amazing here, but the actual opening is just a line of text that flashes very fast.
Oh yeah, very quick. I wasn't even ready for it. I was just like, oh shit.
Yeah, it was gone before I could write it down, so I just looked it up, and I'll read it back just so we can both have it as a frame of reference. But it says, in the near future, corporate networks reach out to the stars. Electrons and light flow throughout the universe. The advance of computerization, however, has not yet wiped out nations and ethnic groups, and that, I think, is a huge part of why this is more relevant today than it was back then. So yeah, that's what plays us into the movie. And yeah, we get, I think it's an aerial view of a cityscape.
Kind of a Batman opening. She's up on a tall building.
It's very Dark Knight-ish.
Yeah.
And it goes without saying, like, just a casual observer would notice this, so this isn't like a revelation or anything. But the city design it's Hong Kong. Like,
yeah.
They say they're in Japan, I believe. Like, I believe the dialogue and the story take place in Japan, but the drawings, like the actual images that were being shown, it's fucking Hong Kong.
No. I'm sorry. I know that there's a rift between certain Asian countries. There's a little bit of a hierarchy, and sorry, Japan, but Hong Kong's pretty fucking incredible to look at. So
it is.
Just admit it. Just admit it. Just say, okay, fine, this is Hong Kong. This is a Japanese production, but this is Hong Kong.
No, I mean, Mamoru Oshii was pretty open about saying oh yeah, we took camera crews to Hong Kong and took tons of reference photos because he decided a lot of it. It's funny, it wasn't so much the beauty of the place, it was more the cloistered nature of it, because there are parts of Hong Kong that's so I live in a fairly small apartment by Seattle standards.
No, you live in a pretty big apartment by Seattle standards.
But if you look at living situations for people in other parts of the world,
yeah,
Hong Kong, it's like bodies on top of bodies on top of bodies, and that was part of what he was trying to convey. And similarly, I think that's part of what they're trying to do with Blade Runner, which you had mentioned. This seems to draw some inspiration from.
I love Blade Runner.
But yeah, we get some radio chatter in both English and Japanese. There's some aerial units flying around this beautifully lit nighttime cityscape, and then we see the Major, Motoko, standing on top of a roof, listening in on some sort of conversation that she's peering in on via night vision goggles. And one of the important lines of dialogue here that she overhears is, "There's no such thing as a bugless program." And like you had said, the shot of her standing on top of a rooftop listening to radio chatter, that's The Dark Knight. Like Christopher Nolan, I don't know if you've seen Ghost in the Shell, but it's okay. It's okay. You can go ahead and give him a little bit of credit, because that's essentially what we're looking at here.
Yeah, he's seen it.
Yeah. Another line of dialogue here is there's reference to something called Project 2501 or 2501. And we get to hear some radio conversation. I don't think it's radio, but it's between the Major, Motoko, and a character named Bato, who we won't meet for a little while here. But she hears a voice in her head, essentially. And it seems like she doesn't have any sort of communicating equipment on her head, so somehow she's being spoken to through her head. And that's a major theme in this film and this franchise is cybernetics. So she has some form of like wireless communication just built into her brain, essentially. And Bato comments that there's a lot of static in your brain. So maybe he's like offering some caution, I guess. Like, hey, you got everything sorted out over there? And she replies with the line, it's that time of the month, as she's like gearing up to head out into some sort of action situation. And then she very casually strips off her clothes.
Oh yeah, she drops trowel, and then I'm like, oh, okay. Is this kind of movie? All right. So I had a question for you. So there is a live action Ghost in the Shell movie with Scarlett Johansson, and I was like, yeah, I'm assuming the anime people really hate it because it's live action and it probably doesn't like. It's hard to please the neckbeards, and I feel like that was probably not pleasing for them. But I saw her I'm like she just gets naked immediately on here. I'm like, so what's going on with that ScarJo Ghost in the Shell movie? How literal are we going with this thing? Are they kind of cleaning it up a bit? Is it rated R? What are we talking about here?
I think from what I gleaned from the trailers, they did something similar with the structure of her body, where, as far as I understand, Motoko's body has no actual sexual organs to it. Like, it has a female form, but it doesn't have the same mechanics.
Yeah.
So when she says it's that time of the month, I don't think she actually does that.
No, she doesn't. I don't think she does either.
No, I don't think she has any of those functions, because she's essentially a robot, a cyborg. And in the case of the live action movie, I think they did that, and they did a situation where it's like there's like a CGI bodysuit or something, so there's no nipples or anything like that. It's just like a doll's body.
I'm sorry, this might be an off-color joke, but if you want to drop another bomb on Japan, have ScarJo play an anatomically correct major in the Ghost in the Shell, like full frontal. Like, you will make your money.
Yeah, you know that flop that you had with that first Ghost in the Shell movie. You can make it all back.
You can make it
just
all
correct that one thing.
Back. You will blow up the Japanese box office if you do that. God, you'll blow up every box office. My goodness.
Yeah.
She could retire. If they paid her the right amount of money, she could retire off of doing Ghost. If she had just done Ghost in the Shell legit like that, yeah. No, she's like, I want $250 million and then I'm done acting because, yeah. It would have made all the money.
She just like shoves the director and she's like, nah, we're doing it. We're doing this right.
We're doing this right. I haven't checked in on her recently after her comments, but I'll have to check in after this.
Well, that Black Widow movie is still in full swing, I think.
They're not going to not make that.
No, of course not. But I don't know how far along they are in production or post production, but I know they had a teaser at Comic-Con, so it's getting there.
Is it going to make money, do you think?
Yeah, I think it will.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, she's not a selling point.
Nope.
She never really has been.
Or is Jeremy Renner, or I mean, not the person, the character. The characters aren't the selling point.
Hawkeye.
Yeah, you might as well make a Hawkeye movie. I'm like, oh my god, I'm asleep. I'm asleep.
No, what they're doing is they're being very smart. Disney Plus is doing that thing where basically they're taking the B Squad, like the Anthony Mackies and the I don't even know the guy who plays Bucky, the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, that guy.
They're taking all those people and they're putting them in the equivalent of like Netflix shows, so streaming shows.
Yeah.
So instead of movies, they get the TV show. It's Sebastian Stan, by the way, is Bucky, and I could totally see them doing that with Hawkeye, yeah. But yeah, so Motoko is listening in on this conversation. There's some sort of shady deal going on, and we get to see Bato and another character, Togusa, who has a super awesome Asian mullet. They're in some sort of command car together, and they're the ones who are communicating with Motoko via remote. There's reference to two organizations. Section 9, which I believe Motoko and Bato and the crew, our main heroes, basically work for. And then Section 6, which is apparently like a similar branch of law enforcement, but they're in conflict with each other. So there's some sort of bureaucratic argument or something that's an ongoing problem between these two organizations. And then we get the iconic sequence where Motoko jumps backwards off the roof of the building with like a wire attached. Again, very Dark Knight-esque. Nolan, you got some splaining to do. And simultaneously, though, there's like a police unit, like a bunch of armored guys running up the staircase, and I guess they're planning on raiding this meeting. And man, there's a lot of gun porn in this movie. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, so real quick, gun porn. Blade Runner. This handgun, the revolver that one of these guys is using, is almost identical to the one that Harrison Ford uses in Blade Runner.
He doesn't have a revolver though. He has an automatic pistol.
Take a look at it, like the way it looks. So the revolver in here doesn't even really look like a revolver. It's like kind of slim on the sides where the whole thing would be. I can't even think of the name of it right now.
The barrel, the cylinder.
You know what I'm talking about.
Is it the revolving chamber?
Yeah, the revolving chamber. You can't really see it on these guns, and it's very similar to the one in Blade Runner. If you take a look at an actual one of those replicas, there is a little bit of a revolver look to it.
Yeah, I mean the Blade Runner blaster, quote unquote, has that chunky look to it. Like I love that the grip on that thing is like it's like as big as your face, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know how big Harrison Ford's hands are, but you need to have some mitts to grip that thing properly. But yeah, I see where you're coming from. But yeah, Mamoru Oshii has a thing about mechanical designs, and it's something that I actually really do value with his design work. Well, not his design work, but the things that he favors, the things that he commissions other people to design for him. Is he's really into realistic mechanics. So things that value like function over form, I guess. So a lot of the mechanical designs in his properties tend to make some sense, like just from a visual standpoint. Just looking at it, it's like, yeah, that does seem like it has some heft to it. That does seem like it would function the way it's portrayed as functioning. And yeah, there's a bit of gun porn here where one of the guys in a suit in like the boardroom has a suitcase. He just like shakes it off and it just converts into a submachine gun. I was like, oh, that's so badass.
Yes, that's pretty bitchin'.
Actually, it made me think of RoboCop 2, which I don't know if you've seen.
I've not seen RoboCop 2, but there's definitely a couple of RoboCop 1 references in here that I kind of picked up on.
I mean, almost any good sci-fi will have that because RoboCop's the fucking best.
No, I haven't seen RoboCop 2.
Maybe we should do that sometime because I think it's underrated in some ways. It's solid.
I definitely have some movies that I find underrated from the 80s, so I could definitely... Is that from the 90s? Is RoboCop 2 from the 90s?
It might be 1990 on the dot.
Well, we're planning a Peter Weller... Weller?
Yeah, I really want to do that. I mean, I didn't put that on the list, but maybe I could find a space for it.
Leviathan is definitely worth a conversation.
Fuck yes. More people need to see Leviathan, even though it's not good. There's value there, people.
There's stuff in there.
Yeah, there's stuff. So we're rating this meeting, and some diplomat pulls the diplomatic immunity card.
Oh, not only does he pull the diplomatic immunity card, he goes out like diplomatic immunity.
Yes, he does. Exactly.
I wrote it down. It's so subtle. That's the coolest thing about this is that we get spoiler alert. We get a headshot, and every time I see a surprise headshot in movies, I think I sent you that song by the band I like. It's about Halo, and the song's called Headshot. Every time I see a surprise headshot, I go headshot, like, and
boom,
headshot, and then I go, oh, headsplosion! This guy's head just fucking boom goes scanners like all over the place.
That's another thing that Mamoru Oshii does really well is subtlety. He oftentimes has action and extreme violence in his films, but it's usually kind of portrayed in a nonchalant manner. Where, like, in this instance, we get a person getting shot in the head, and everybody in the room's just kind of like, what just happened? And then his head explodes, and it's still what just happened. Like, it's not it's not framed in a cinematic way.
Well,
Because there are ways to frame violence in such a way as to play up the spectacle angle of it. He doesn't really do that.
Well,
It's like that is a thing that happened.
all that happens in the animation, like what we're seeing, not what the characters are seeing, is that he's just standing there, and then there's just a black dot on his forehead, pretty much. So and then I think there might be like a little bit of like a out the back of the head. I can't be for sure, but yeah, it's very subtle. And if I had been looking down writing a note, I wouldn't even caught it. Luckily I was looking at it right then.
But yeah, just before he gets shot in the head, he's having this very, very Japanese argument with one of the officers who kicks down the door. Basically, he's saying, I have diplomatic immunity. I'm trying to get political asylum for a programmer. Put a pin in that. And then this cop is arguing with him, like, while there's a bunch of guns drawn. Like, they're just going back and forth arguing. He's like, I have all my papers in order. I'll transfer you a copy in a few days. I'm like, oh my god, that's maybe the most Japanese thing ever said. It's like, this is how men in suits talk. It's like, I will fax you a copy of my papers. Everyone put your guns away.
Yeah, don't worry about this. Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad move, honestly. Like, you just be confident. Like, no, put your guns down. It's fine. I'll send you the copies. Just don't worry about it. It's fine.
But I just like how like he's like, I don't even have it on me. It's just like, I'll get it to you when I get it to you.
I don't have fucking time for this right now. Yeah.
But yeah, he is rudely interrupted by a shot through the window. I believe Motoko says something here. I can't remember the line of dialogue, but she verbalizes something from outside the room, and everybody freaks out for a second, and then before anyone knows what's happening, Diplomat gets a bullet in the forehead. He spazzes out for a couple seconds, and then his head explodes.
Yes.
It's juicy. But we see like just a little glimpse of like his spinal cord on top of his shoulders, and we can tell that he's not 100% human.
No.
So he had some cybernetic implants of some sort, or I don't know how robotic he was. And then we get this very Hans Gruber-esque shot of her like disappearing into the ether. So the cops run to the window where the bullet came from, and they see Motoko like essentially falling away from them, and it's in super slow motion. And we see her face, but she's like receding into like some sort of camouflage or like cloaking. They call it thermo-optic camouflage. But basically it's the shot of this woman falling off a building in super slow motion looking up at us, and then she just disappears like a ghost. And I could not help but think of Hans Gruber falling off that building in slow motion. Yeah. Dun, dun, dun.
Fun Die Hard fact. Do you know why he made that expression like that?
Because they dropped him.
Yeah, without him knowing that.
without telling
we're gonna go
him.
on 3. 1, boom. Yeah, so he wasn't ready for it, which is nice.
I love seeing the making of that. How it was actually like a crash pad with essentially like a matte painting on it.
That's pretty cool. I did not know
badass.
that. I didn't know
like
that.
He basically did like a circus stunt.
That's
like,
pretty cool.
He didn't say I'm ready to go, but it looks great on film. In fact, the lighting of that still looks good. It still looks perfect, if you ask me.
I'm due for a rewatch of 1 and 3. The third one's been on my mind for like a month now. I just haven't. You know, when you want to watch a movie, you want to rewatch it, but then when you go to sit down to watch a movie, you're like, nah, I'm not in the mood for it right now. It's been like that for like a month. I need to pull the trigger on it.
That was me and Highlander this week.
Oh god.
For some reason, I was just like all about Highlander this past week, and I sat down and I watched like all of them.
I've tried.
They're all bad.
I've tried so hard to get through Highlander. I've tried 3 times to get through Highlander. I can't make it halfway through. It's so bad.
Kyle, let me ask you this: they're all bad. I still enjoy them. They are all bad. Mm-hmm. Like, not even the first one's good. But did you pay attention to the shots in the first one and the editing?
Like I said, I got through almost half of it, and the jumping around, it was just making no sense. It was so corny. I just couldn't.
Okay, because the only thing that makes the first one special, if you ask me, is the soundtrack, which is largely Freddie Mercury. And then the shots and the editing, because some of the transition work and some of the ambitious like crane shots they do in that are pretty striking. But the story and the acting, the script is wretched.
Yeah.
It's horrible. And Christopher Lambert, I don't know how the fuck he got cast for that. Like, how do you take a Frenchman and ask him to be Scottish, and then ask him, a blind man, to wield a sword in multiple films?
Yeah, right?
Like, how do you get that gig? Because I want some of that. Anyway.
Yeah.
Opening credits. This is one of my very favorite opening sequences in any film. Mamoru Oshii has 2 films. Pat Labor 2 has one of my very favorite opening sequences in any film. I think I've sent it to you more than once. This one's right up there with it, though, because holy shit, this animation is gorgeous. The music. Oh, man. The music is done by a fellow by the name of Kenji Kawai, who is a fairly prolific Japanese composer. He's worked on many a great film. Almost all of Mamoru Oshii's films, as far as I know. And funny enough, he does a lot of Chinese movies. He did all the Ip Man films, which, if you've been following the show, we covered, actually, the first Ip Man film. Very, very strong composer. He loves him some synthesizer, though. It doesn't work all the time, but in this case, pitch perfect. The choir is unique. It's like Akira level, like, unique. But yeah, some of the imagery here, Kyle, like, fuck.
It's fantastic. That was one of the notes. I'm like, the title sequence is great because we're going back and forth. I like this in movies, and I can see it in my head. I can't think of what I'm thinking of. I can't think of the movie, but where we're going back and forth between credits, but we're also moving, like, we're getting a little bit of backstory for the movie, like a little bit of the character. Like we're going back between credits, and then I think they have her, like, they're showing that she's is she technically a cyborg? Is she full cyborg? Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, we're going back and forth between shots of the credits, and they're kind of moving the story along, saying that she's. How would you describe her?
So, actually, funny enough, the name of this piece of music is, I think, just called "Making of a Cyborg," and that's exactly what we see. It's essentially like watching a cybernetic body from like think Terminator style.
Yeah.
So we go from the mechanical skeleton to the human skin covering. So we keep cutting back and forth in this wonderful rhythm, and he does the exact same trick in Pat Labor 2, where it's title card, a bit of montage of doing something industrial, title card, industrial footage. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we get to see the creation of her body, like in a factory, basically.
Oh, I'm thinking of
creating a cyborg.
I'm thinking of Alien 3, I believe. I think Alien 3 starts with something along like.
Yes, it does actually.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking.
We keep cutting to footage of the alien, the facehugger, crawling into the stasis tank.
Yeah.
And then it keeps cutting back to credits.
Ooh,
Good memory, Kyle. I didn't remember that until just now, but you're right.
I might be watching that later. Damn.
That movie, there's so much to say about that movie.
Oh, we'll have plenty to talk about here in September. Spoiler alert.
We will September. Do you remember? But yeah, this montage basically shows us the creation of, like, I don't know if it's a new body from Otoko, but as we learn throughout the movie, she is essentially like a full body replacement cyborg. So her essence is maybe the only thing that's actually her. Everything, like her entire physiology is mechanical.
That's what I was kind of getting. I'm comparing it to Alice from Resident Evil, and you know what? I rewatched the last Resident Evil movie. It's still fun, dude. I don't know what it is about that movie, but I find it very watchable. It's not good.
Excuse to go through all of those.
If we do,
I think I missed one or two of them, but they're stupid fun.
So
they're so stupid.
The beautiful thing about the Resident Evil, this last one, the final chapter, I think is what it is. Sure,
I did see that one.
But they recap everything at the beginning, which is really great. You know how much money those movies have made? I almost texted you while I was watching it. It's ridiculous.
Like $1 billion.
I'm like, why are there so many of these movies? And I looked at
they make bank.
They make money. It's crazy. I'm like, no wonder she's doing these. But Yeah, they recap everything at the beginning of that movie. But I think that essentially that's what Alice is that Mila Jovovich's character is this, like, prototype cyborg, but they have, like, a shit ton of them. And
Yeah.
it's her essence going into each one of these things. That's what I kind of got from this.
Well, in Motoko's case, yes, but that's one of the central like themes to the plot is that like is she a person? Because all she is just electrical signals that form memories.
And this is
Like
do androids dream of electric sheep? This is kind of the idea in Blade Runner, and this is kind of an idea that we explore in the Matrix. That's where get echoes here.
But again, that's why I think the story is probably more relevant today than it was in 1995, because we're approaching that point where we're starting to do this shit.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
We're
a central part.
We're not starting to do this stuff. You and I are just hearing about them doing this stuff. Somebody has got their own fucking Michael Fassbender from Alien Covenant somewhere that they're like, tell me, like, oh, if you created me, then who created you? Like, someone's got that android somewhere.
Well, it's like, not to completely derail things, but the theme that I'm kind of pushing here is that of transhumanism.
Yeah.
Where we're reaching a stage in our evolution as a species where there's starting to become like almost like a widespread desire to migrate away from humanity, where like for instance having more of an online presence, or like even something as simple as like having an Instagram account or something that you put more of your self-worth into than your actual physical being and your relationships to people one-on-one. Something like that is the human body and your physical representation as important as that of how you present yourself. So you can choose to present yourself like these days almost any way you want.
Yeah.
And in Motoko's case, like I think that's part of why they use nudity and things like that in this the way they do, is to represent the fact that is it even important that she's a woman?
No.
Because it really probably isn't.
It makes no difference for the character in this movie. Like
Exactly.
It does not matter. Yeah.
Yeah. So keep that as Kyle and I are talking
Sorry.
about that. Keep that thought in your mind because it's a huge theme for the film.
I'm just saying those same philosophical questions are echoed in previous movie Blade Runner, subsequent movie The Matrix, and it keeps coming up in movies now, sci-fi movies.
I mean, to quote Castlevania Symphony of the Night, "What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets."
Thinking meat.
Following our opening credit sequence, actually, it takes a few minutes to fully peter out. Motoko wakes up in her apartment, and it's pretty much entirely dark. And there's some really great subtle animation of when she first wakes up. Like, it looks so genuine. Like, the way she shakes off her, sleepiness. Like, she does a little thing where, like, she brushes a finger over one of her eyelids, and she opens her window, and we get this gorgeous shot from essentially her doorway, looking towards her bed and her window, and it's just like a shot like overlooking a cityscape, and the only light in her apartment is coming through the window, and it's just gorgeous composition.
Yeah.
And then she steps out of frame and like puts on a jacket and then walks past the camera, and I believe the music from the title sequence actually continues throughout the entirety of this, and it just kind of drones on for a good solid minute. It's one of those like almost like Hitchcockian things where it's like, what are we doing here? It's like this is nice, but I don't know what we're doing here. And then I think she shuts the blinds and the music just crashes to an end, and then end scene. It's brilliant. Fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
Then,
go ahead.
What?
I was gonna say, don't we cut to the garbage guys?
Not quite.
No.
We get a little bit of a briefing. So a VTOL lands on the roof of Section 9 headquarters, and we get to meet Mr. Aramaki. He's the guy with the Dr. Wily hair.
Yeah.
Minus the mustache, but I guess push the mustache down to his chin. I think this character in the live-action version is played by Beat Takeshi. He's like a super powerful actor / director from Japan. from the trailers anyway. That's what I got. But Mr. Aramaki, in my notes, I was largely referring to as the boss, because he's basically the chief. And we get the first instance of a situation. This is another staple of Mamoru Oshii's writing style, where we're having a conversation in an elevator, and it's between a gentleman, I think his last name is Nakamura, from Section 6, again, the rival organization to Section 9, talking to Mr. Aramaki. And the way they're talking, like I said, this is kind of a staple of Mamoru Oshii's writing, where they're just throwing jargon and stuff at you that there's no it's all exposition, but without going into the details of like what they're actually talking about. So he's not pandering to his audience. He's basically just assuming that you'll figure it out. So at this stage in the film, like both you and I are probably like, okay, that's a lot of buzzwords. I'm trying to make sure to file them away because I'm sure they'll be important later. But for now, I don't have a fucking clue what we're talking about. But the main thing here is that there's a colonel named Malice, and Section 6 wants to deport him. And by the way, they also send their thanks to Section 9 for assassinating that diplomat for them. Again, stuff is moving. I'm not entirely sure why or what's important and what's not, but it's interesting. And then we get to meet the foreign minister's interpreter. Well, not necessarily meet, because her brain was hacked off screen. And she's just like on an operating table here. And this is where we get introduced to the plot of the film, that of the puppet master. And do you have anything you want to say about this scene, Kyle?
No, at this point, sometimes with when I'm watching something new, if I'm not entirely sure what's happening yet, I'm not really. It doesn't really sink in. So at this point in the movie, I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure what's happening just yet. It'll make a little more sense once it gets going. So I'm a little hazy through this area. I don't have good notes right here.
The main thing to take away from this scene is that there's a young woman laying on a gurney essentially, and she has strings of wires coming out of the top of her skull, hooked up to a computer. And as it so happens, her brain was hacked by someone. So we're establishing the rules of this universe that people have computer brains and they can be hacked.
At this point, the Matrix is playing in my head and it was bothering me. That's why I wasn't paying attention through here, because I was like, man, this really feels like like the Matrix. I'm like, even Major reminds me of Carrie-Anne Moss a little bit.
Do you want to talk about that now? Like
yeah,
Wachowskis and this movie?
I found it distracting. I found it a little distracting while I just started watching this, and then I kept like making notes. I'm like, it's a little more Blade Runner as it goes along. But this movie, if you've seen The Matrix, will feel very familiar. There's a few things in here that I think the Wachowskis, I don't think they were trying to. I don't think there's enough for plagiarism, or I don't think there's any kind of court case you can make out of this. But there are definitely themes as far as like the philosophy of what is real, what is human. I think that kind of parallels in The Matrix in this, but also the world that they build up with the cyborg
data jacks.
Yeah, the data stuff, like that just that visual kind of got me, and I'm like, oh, well, that looks like what they did with The Matrix. I'm like, are they trying to? Was that what the Wachowskis were trying to get at? Like, were these even real people? I don't know. I was kind of lost in thought during this part, so I was a little confused. But the Wachowskis apparently showed. Is it the producer? The producer for the movie?
Yeah. Joel Silver.
Yeah, I guess they got a lot of inspiration from Akira, Ninja Scroll, and apparently they wanted to do like not a live action version of this movie, but this was kind of the influence for The Matrix, quote unquote. I'm not entirely sure how accurate that is, but you can see it at least.
Well, I think the quote you sent me from the trivia there was they asked Joel Silver to watch the film, and they said, we want to do this, but live action.
Yeah.
And I guess that was their pitch for The Matrix. And Joel Silver is a I mean, he has a strong track record for backing some pretty strong horses, and obviously The Matrix worked out for all of them.
Yeah.
But I think thematically, Ghost in the Shell probably resonated with the Wachowskis like on a very deep level. Because again, that transhumanism component of the story is not something you can overlook in reference to the Wachowskis.
No.
They have a pretty consistent theme from like probably The Matrix onward. Because I think they did Assassins. I think they wrote that shitty Stallone versus Antonio Banderas movie.
Oh Lord,
that is not a good movie. I think they wrote that.
The Wachowskis don't have a good track record, to be honest with you.
It's more misses than hits, but their perspective is definitely unique.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make here is like from The Matrix onward, there is a fairly consistent theme across many of their films, except maybe Speed Racer, that it oftentimes has to do with like a disconnect between the essence of a person and their physical form. Like your favorite, Cloud Atlas.
Oh, I love it.
We have instances of Hugo Weaving being presented as a female nurse, I believe, and then a Korean man, and then like Slash from Guns N' Roses at the end, but like with Frankenstein makeup. And then The Matrix, obviously, you have a situation where people have digital selves and then they have physical selves, and those don't necessarily jive with one another. It probably was if you had made that movie today, and I know for a fact they're trying to get another one going.
Are you serious? I'm so down.
I think that's what you're going to see is like a Ready Player One style presentation where the Matrix version of our lead characters are probably going to be radically different from their physical self, because that's, I think, more genuine to what the actual online experience is like. Most people, if given the option to create an avatar for themselves, won't put themselves in the virtual environment or wherever. They'll go with what truly appeals to them or what they feel best represents them. And I feel like the core theme of Ghost in the Shell definitely is something that probably spoke to both of them at this point in their life. And also, it needs to be said, there's a little thing called Shadowrun. It's like D&D, but cyberpunk future. And by the way, it takes place in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, nice.
And as far as I know, it came out in like the late 80s. So I would not be surprised if like the data jacking element of that probably could have inspired Masamune Shirow in writing the Ghost in the Shell manga and the Wachowskis, because I'm pretty sure they were familiar with Shadowrun.
I would.
My brother was familiar with Shadowrun, so like he wasn't super into the nerdy tabletop culture, but he touched it.
He touched it.
Yeah, he touched the darkness. But yeah, this scene with the foreign minister's interpreter, basically what we the audience learn here is that people have computer brains and they can be hacked. And there's a character by the name of the Puppet Master who's apparently super fucking good at it. So as we're trying to pursue this Puppet Master, Motoko is assigned to rendezvous with our buddies Bato and Kai. Kai, who I more commonly think of as Togusa. But basically the two guys who were in the command car in the first mission we saw them all on. So it's like Section 9 suspects that Puppet Master is American. He's a cyber terrorist, and this is his first time operating in this country, which I think we mentioned is supposed to be Japan. But the visual aesthetic of it is most certainly Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And apparently they're using some sort of outdated computer. And then we get a scene where Motoko is riding around in the back of a van, gearing up. So she's like putting on body armor and like assembling a gun, and we get some more gun porn here. And she's talking to Togusa, who's driving the van. And the gun porn is she's basically criticizing his choice of weapon. He has a revolver, and she's like, "Oh, I know those don't jam, so I understand the practicality in selecting it, but I need you to use something else." And it's just a back and forth technical jargon. You can tell that Mamoru Oshii was probably really into that, probably jerking it a little bit while he was writing it. But we get a really important little detail here that. Well, not really important, but it's a detail that I appreciate. Basically, Motoko explains why Kai is on the team. And her reasoning is that he doesn't really have many cybernetics. So she's basically a full body replacement cyborg. So she's a robot person. And Bato, like, I don't know if we mentioned, but his eyes are basically just two lenses implanted in his face. So he is very blatantly a cybernetic organism of some sort.
Yeah.
Whereas Kai comes across as pretty much straight up human. And she explains that she wants him on the group because his perspective and his reactions will be different from her and Bato. Where it's like his reactions may be inferior, but they'll be unique to her and Bato. So basically she's saying me and Bato like have these mechanically enhanced reflexes and cognitive functions that you don't have, and therefore your perspective will be different in some fashion, and it might be valuable to us. So she's
Teamwork.
looking for variety. Yeah, teamwork. Because if you have all the components working in the same fashion, you're just going to get a singular result, as opposed to having some variation among them, where it's like, okay, we can change it up on the fly. But now we get to the garbage men.
Oh yeah, they're what is it? So I have my notes are brain plugs, van ride, garbage truck, and I have garbage truck as a question mark. I'm like, is that a garbage truck? And it's these two fellows just riffing back and forth. I don't know what their significance is really, but what did they end up picking up something that they're not supposed to? Is that what I understand?
The back and forth that happens between these two people is that the one guy who's driving, he's stopping at a bunch of payphones and doing some sort of transaction at these payphones. And by the way, the mechanical design of these phone cards, like, I don't know who designed that. It's such a small detail, but it's damn sexy. But yeah, this driver, we learn that he wants to quote unquote ghost hack, and I interpret hacking one's ghost as essentially intruding on their essence or their personhood via computer or via like Wi-Fi or what have you. So he wants to ghost hack his wife so he can learn what she's thinking, because apparently they're getting divorced. And he exposits that he met some hacker at a bar who said, I can do that for you, but you just got to make a bunch of phone calls at all these payphones for me. Apparently this guy's quite dense, because that is suspicious as all hell.
Yeah.
So at this point, I don't think our heroes are aware that they're supposed to be tracking down these garbage men. But we keep cutting back and forth between our heroes driving around town and these garbage men making various stops. Needs to be said, Bato is I didn't catch his name, but he has a beard. It's pretty cool looking. But they're driving around this red sports car, because that's what you do. So they're also on the same mission. They're supposed to rendezvous with Motoko. But this is where we get to see the data jack for the first time. So Motoko is now sitting up front in the van, and just these fucking metal prongs come out of the back of her seat and stab into the back of her neck. And she uses the 1995 equivalent of Google Maps via these prongs in the back of your neck to access information, probably from the city or something, to map out the routes of all the garbage trucks in the area, because somehow she got wise to the fact that we're looking for a garbage truck. I think she reasons that it's because garbage trucks have an excuse to start and stop constantly and constantly be on the move. And then, without moving her lips or her face or anything, she electronically takes control of the car from Togusa. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, the other two, is it Batu? Is he with the other guy? Or
yeah, the beard man.
Beard man. They pull up to where the garbage guys were just at, and a guy comes downstairs. He's like, "Oh, I was gonna take my garbage out, but I must have missed him." This guy sounds exactly like Don Knotts. I thought it was Don Knotts, Barney Fife from Andy Griffith. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is not what he's supposed to sound like. I don't think that's what they intended. But yeah, I guess they just missed him, so now they have to go try to get these guys.
Yeah. And long story short, Basically, we're following this garbage truck, and the driver becomes aware that they're being tracked because their boss, presumably at the dump or whatever, actually calls their truck and says like, "Hey, why are the cops looking for you guys?" And so the driver hits the gas, and he's in a bit of a panic. And then we come across some gentleman wearing sunglasses at a payphone, and this is one of the more famous sequences in this movie. There are several, but this is one that definitely stuck out to me, especially the first time I saw it. But this guy is immediately suspicious, and he's staring straight ahead down the road, and I believe the garbage truck and Motoko's van are driving straight towards him, and we get this really cool shot from his perspective, of a normal human's perspective of two cars driving towards him. But then there's a static flash and it zooms in, so it's like, oh, he has robot eyes. He has robot binocular vision, which is not something we have today.
No.
And then he pulls out a what looks like a micro Uzi, so a very, very compact submachine gun, and he lays into this fucking van.
Yeah.
And it's pretty fucking, on a conceptual level, it's really cool to look at, because he pulls out this SMG, and it's beautifully rendered, very realistic, and we see him plant his feet, he takes up a stance, and then as he unloads this submachine gun, we actually see him sliding backwards. So apparently the force, the report of this gun is such that it's pushing his entire body backwards. So the impression we get here just from that visual is that this is no ordinary gun. It may be compact, it may look like something we had in 1995, but it's shooting something else. And he flips the fucking truck and the van, I think, with that. And it's pretty fucking cool.
So yeah, during the shootout, I was gonna ask you. I thought it was kind of neat how they do the bullets in the truck. So
yeah.
So the truck's sitting there, and it dents that he sprays bullets across it. It's like. I thought it was pretty neat because I'm like, okay, so if we're hand drawing everything, we have the same truck, and then bullet creasing in here, bullet going in there, bullet going in there. It just seemed like it would take a lot of time to do that. I could be wrong, but
well, it's funny. I can't remember exactly how that shot plays out, but if the truck was not in motion, then yeah, they could just apply decals to that plate, I guess. So just put the bullet impacts on there one at a time on top of each other and just create layers upon layers upon layers. But if they had to animate the entire truck moving, then they'd have to redraw each and every one of those bullet impacts individually over and over and over again.
Yeah, the truck's not moving, so I'm assuming they just put, yeah.
They probably, just layer upon layer of bullet decals. Which, I mean, on a technical level, what's really cool about all of the gunplay in this is that, like you said, it feels like you're watching a movie.
Yeah.
Where it feels like you're watching a rigged explosion or something. Where it's it doesn't feel like you're watching a drawing. It feels like it has weight and impact to it. It's very good stuff.
It feels like it's working within the limitations of camera use.
Yes. Yes. There's the adherence to real life physics is apparent. You can tell that they took that into consideration. Yeah. It's admirable. It's not something you see every day in animation.
That's a little. It's not what you're expecting in an anime, because I'm expecting weird close-ups and just stuff like that.
I mean, if you look at the Yoshiaki Kawajiri, the guy who did Ninja Scroll, his use of camera movement in particular, he takes advantage of the fact that it's just drawings.
Yeah.
So you can do whatever crazy horseshit you want, but Mamoru Oshii, he treats it like a film. Yeah. It's no, logistically that would be impossible. So we can't shoot from that angle.
Yeah.
And his compositions in particular look filmic. They look like almost something a photographer would do. In fact, a lot of his montages are wordless, and it's just strictly images. And each and every composition is just gorgeous. But enough gushing on that. We have an action sequence to talk about here. So So yeah, as it so happens, this gentleman with the sunglasses has thermo-optic camouflage, similar to what Motoko had in the very first scene we saw her in. And he runs away. Bato takes some shots at him, and we take shots back and forth. It's a typical 90s action scene. So Bato and Motoko are both pursuing this guy, and Bato's like chasing him on street level, whereas Motoko just like effortlessly scales a roof, parkour style. And we get like some beautiful renderings of like a Chinese street market, basically.
Yeah.
The attention to detail here is pretty fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Bato actually goes into the market on foot. He's looking for this guy, and it's a very suspenseful scene for a few seconds. And he uses his cybernetic eyes to spot the hacker in the crowd. And he chases him out to the docks. Motoko takes some shots at him from the roof. There's a beautiful shot looking up from the slum area, just like looking straight up from like an ant's perspective up through the buildings. Mm-hmm. It's one of those uncommon perspectives it's maybe the least common perspective we as people have of things is looking straight up. So it's always eye-catching. And then we get probably like one of the most famous scenes in the whole movie where the gentleman with the sunglasses discards his jacket. He runs out to like a bombed out slum area, and there's this pool of water, and he jumps in there, and all of a sudden he starts getting beat up by the air.
Yeah.
I think I saw this recreated in the trailers for the live action movie. Understandably so. It's pretty badass sequence. So basically, Motoko is now wearing the thermal optic camouflage, and I'm guessing this guy's camouflage was built into the jacket that he discarded. Not sure why he did that.
Yeah, I don't know why he did that.
But yeah, we get an entire, like, it's pretty brief, but it's a hand-to-hand fight sequence where this man is getting beat up by an invisible opponent. And he gets beat the fuck up, though. Like, he gets multiple limbs wrist. Broken. Yeah, he gets broken to shit. And then I think the sequence ends with that Chuck Norris spin kick.
Yeah, the roundhouse.
You need a roundhouse kick. Yeah, you need a roundhouse kick in there. That's the only acceptable finishing move. And then it's revealed that Motoko is nude. Not fully nude, but largely nude. We don't get to see any details. But she has this like helmet and veil that's covering her face that I guess allows her to be fully invisible. I'm guessing the reason for her being nude is that it allows her to completely camouflage herself, like head to toe. But then we get a couple of lines of dialogue here where the guy is just like laying on the ground and his expression communicates nothing. Like he's just blank. And the phrase is thrown out there, he's a puppet without a ghost. And it's implied that this guy was being used, like manipulated in some fashion, like his mind and his body were being used by someone else independent of himself, and so he doesn't seem to have any idea what's going on.
Yeah, it kind of, this is where it kind of felt like Blade Runner, because he's like, oh, you think I'm gonna talk? He's the guy on the ground. Like, you think I'm gonna talk to the cops? I'm not gonna say nothing. And Batu's like, talk, like, do you even know who you are? Like, do you have any memories whatsoever? And it's kind of a thing in Blade Runner, is they're like, these androids think that they're real, and they're like, oh, so you think you're real, huh? Like, why don't you tell me about your mother? Why don't you tell me the first thing you ever remember? I was starting to see a little bit of a parallel there. So yeah, who was this guy taken over by? Was he taken over by the puppet master?
I think it's supposed to be the puppet master.
See, I thought he was kind of rogue. That's the impression that I got watching it. I'm like, oh, so this is playing into what they're looking for, but I thought maybe this guy was just rogue on his own.
It'd be like the opening of a James Bond movie. Where it's like, it may or may not factor into what happens later.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess in anime you don't really have that luxury. Like, we have to draw everything.
An 83-minute long.
Yeah, it's like we don't really have that luxury. And James Bond movies, like, yeah, we got all kinds of time.
Yeah, they do tend to run pretty long, at least the newer generation ones. But yeah, then we cut to a raid. So Mr. Aramaki, the boss, he's like camped out in like a patch of forest, and he's surrounded by a bunch of cops. And the guy leading the raid, I couldn't help but like think like, holy shit, he's got like the full on Don Johnson garb going, like his outfit. Like I was like, that's the guy leading the raid. Cool. And then we get another staple of Mamoru Oshii's directing style, where we get a sequence where what's happening visually doesn't match what's happening on the audio level. So basically, we're looking at like observational footage before a raid of someone stepping off of a helicopter and meeting with, I believe this is the Colonel Malice, who was spoken about towards the beginning of the film. But basically, it's like perspective footage, complete with time codes at the bottom of the screen, so it looks like security cam footage. While Bato is talking about something completely independent of this. So what your eyes are, what your visual information is taking in is completely independent of what your ears are taking in. So you have to really pay attention. But yeah, Bato exposits that the guy that they apprehended, his nickname is Corgi, and they're in the middle of interrogating both him and the garbage man. And the scene ends with the boss ordering the go on the raid. And then we get a really cool scene here that it's very brief, but it's very impactful. The garbage man is in an interrogation room, and they're questioning him. And he obviously was under the impression that he was taking steps to hack his wife. That's literally the only thing we know about him. However, over the course of this interrogation, we learn that he doesn't have a wife, nor a daughter. And it needs to be said, when he was talking to his friend in the garbage truck, he actually offered to show him a photo of his family. He was like, "Oh, you want to see my kid? She's adorable." And the guy said no. And then, while he's in the interrogation room, one of the officers speaking with him actually hands him the photo that he had on his person. And we, the viewer, see that it's a photo of himself walking his dog. And he's not really saying anything here, but he just starts crying. Like, his face doesn't move, but just like tears start streaming down his face because basically this is a situation where a person was given false memories of a huge chunk of their life, probably against their will. And so he's just like, his reality is just shooken up here. And that's another big theme, is that, memories and feelings can be manufactured. At the end of the day, it's all electrical signals, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
And then we get the diving scene, Kyle, and there are some shots in here that I'm sure jumped out at you.
Is this when they're on the boat?
Yeah.
Oh, I was actually the dialogue was what caught me during this part, because this is a really dialogue heavy. Yeah, this is when it really started to sound a bit more Matrix and Blade Runner-esque, when she's kind of talking about like I didn't write down any of the dialogue, but just
she just like launches into philosophy talk.
Yeah, she's literally just talking about like the philosophy of being an android. Like, am I the real one? Does it matter? Is my brain being in this robotic body mean that I'm actually a person? Because isn't it to be human to have these electrical signals in your brain telling you human thing, like how to be a human? Doesn't that make me? It's kind of weird.
Sounds like my lady friends when it gets to be too late in the evening and I have to go home.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a reason we're just friends. Forgot about that. But yeah, this scene, there's a couple of shots in here that are just absolutely gorgeous, where Motoko is diving and she has like an air tank on her back that also doubles as like thrusters and then a mask. And we're launched into the scene by her just like sinking to like 50 feet below the surface of the water, and then using the thrusters to push herself back up. And when she breaches the surface, we get a shot from her perspective of her body, like her limp form, and then she can see her own reflection from the surface of the water, like refracting, and she merges with herself. Put a pin in that. And then she comes up to the surface of the water, and again we get another beautiful perspective shot of some like water droplets on her mask, but the way the light is bouncing off the water droplets inside there, and we can see the sky reflected on her mask, which is bathed in orange, by the way. Pollution. It's just beautiful. But yeah, Bato is on the boat, and at this point he does actually mention that, hey, it's kind of curious that your hobby is diving, being as you have a cybernetic body that is made of heavy metals and will sink. Mm-hmm. He's like, if your floating apparatus fails, that's it, you're done. And it's funny because without replying, she just starts taking off her clothes again, and he turns away and he's like, fuck. He's just like, I'm not about to get in an argument with a nude woman. That's just rude.
She
on
gets
her boat, no less.
She gets naked about as many times as Melisandre does in Game of Thrones. I know you're not familiar, but the red woman, she gets naked all the time. You could probably find just a montage of all the time she gets naked in that show.
Does she have like Ava Green numbers or something?
No, literally, like almost every time her character's on screen, she gets naked, and she's a reoccurring character. Yeah, it's kind of her thing. They explain it a little bit more why she does that every time, but yeah.
Maybe she has a skin condition. She chafes easily or something, or like she gets rashes.
I can't tell you.
These clothes.
These clothes are really bothering me. No.
I'm just so hot all the time.
Again, we're not shooting a porno. Put your clothes back on. There's no reason to be naked. Do we get the song with all the cityscapes here? Because I had some questions here.
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to touch for a second about the stuff that Motoko was talking about, but I mean, there's not much more to say than what you already did. But basically, it's Motoko is pondering like what it means to be human, and she laments the fact that actually this was one of the biggest details I caught this time around when I watched it, was that she laments the fact that by nature of the fact that she and Bato's bodies are cybernetic and in fact rented to them, they're kind of stuck in their roles, because as officers of Section 9, they need to have their bodies equipped in a certain fashion in order to do their jobs properly, right? It's equivalent to like going to college and like getting a certain degree or getting certain certifications, but like body modifications. So you can't possibly afford that, so you get these modifications, and then technically your actual physical body is owned by the organization that you work for. So if you want to resign, you need to return it. So then what?
Yeah.
Which I thought was really fascinating, because I could totally see that happening in the future, where she even talks about the nature of memory and the fact that certain memories that she and Bato have, for instance, could be very useful to investigations, or could be good for record keeping or something. Are they going to repossess those too? And if you factor that in, it becomes an argument of like, how human am I, or am I just like a tool or a computer? But yeah, during the course of their conversation, which you can tell Bato is not terribly enthused about having, a voice speaks to both of them directly into their heads, and the quote is, "For now, we see through a glass darkly," and it's my understanding that this was the puppet master basically speaking to both of them somehow via remote. But yeah, then we get the montage, which you said you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, well, the song kicks in, and I had to have the subtitles on, 'cause it was hard to hear on my TV. The subtitles are like women singing in foreign language. I like how how we're just base we're getting here. Like, yeah, just keep it simple. Yeah, the cityscape. So I like this little montage. It's nice. I wasn't really expecting it. It kind of like, I'm like, oh, okay, so this is kind of like what you'd see in a movie. Yeah. But I was confused because she keeps seeing herself in other places, and like in these windows as she's like driving through.
Yeah. So, again, another staple of Mamoru Oshii's directing style. He's very big on musical interludes, very long sequences where no words are spoken. It's just music and images, and more often than not, they're very effective. Like you definitely get something out of them. In this case, we get to see like Hong Kong waterways, Japanese waterways, but rendered to look like Hong Kong. And yeah, she keeps seeing herself around town, and I think she's like she's on a ferry, and then she sees herself in an office building looking down at herself. And I kind of interpret this to be, again, part of that theme of, like, is she just a vessel or is she an actual distinct being? Because her physical form, like seeing her physical form elsewhere, she's a manufactured product. There is actually a fairly high likelihood that she would see herself like as like another cyborg or something. Like she could pass someone who looks exactly like her on the street. In fact, I mean, you see that sometimes with like plastic surgery and stuff, where like certain surgeons have a signature style, and if you went to the same guy, there's a good chance you'll end up looking like someone who came from the same doctor or something.
Wasn't that what happens in 2049? Blade Runner 2049, like maybe it's not 2049, but he's got that girlfriend, but it's like he's got the girlfriend and she's like super special. She's like not even a cyborg. She's like a computer program.
She's a hologram.
And then he kind of walks by and he sees that giant hologram of her. Like he sees like, no, everybody gets these. Like you're not special. Like it's not special for you. Like lots of people have these.
Well, maybe
there's misremembering.
No, you're right. And he's continually purchasing upgrades to make her more complete as a consciousness, I guess. I mean, she never becomes a consciousness as far as I understand, but like she becomes closer and closer and closer to it. And then they have that wonky scene where she projects herself onto the other gal who's now going to be in that Terminator movie, who has the best agent in Hollywood, by the way. That gal, I don't know her name, but holy shit, she gets some roles, man.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, she plays the hooker.
The hooker.
2049.
Yeah.
It's a very prestigious role.
I don't know. She's going to be in the new Terminator movie. I don't think her agent's that great.
But she was in, like, The Martian before Blade Runner 2049, so, like, she's getting big roles. Somebody has confidence in her.
There's a lot of people in The Martian, but you know what's weird is there's, like, a lot of noteworthy, like, Donald Glover, Jeff Daniels, somebody else pops up. Is Jessica Chastain, or is it Bryce Dallas Howard? Or is it neither one of them?
I think it's Chastain.
It's Chastain because she's also in Interstellar. But most of that movie is just Matt Damon, and you forget that like Kristen Wiig is in there. Like
no, it has a gigantic cast.
But yeah, I really like Jeff Daniels in that movie.
I just like Jeff Daniels, to be honest. I always have.
It's so weird.
I saw fucking Fly Away Home in the theater.
Anna Paquin. So I was like, Anna Paquin popped into my head the other day because I think I was listening to a podcast about X-Men or something, and she came up, but she had a moment where she would just pop up in the weirdest places. Like she's in She's All That. Like she's like the sister.
She's the older sister. Yeah.
And she pops up in Almost Famous as just one of like with we can never remember her name. Bad Lieutenant. Vicky Valancourt. Like. She's in the group of the Band-Aid. She's one of the Band-Aids. I'm like, that's fucking Anna Paquin. She's just there. Like, maybe because she was she was a real big. She won an Oscar when she was like 8 or 9. Like she was really young. She best supporting.
Very young, probably like 11 or something.
Maybe that's why. It's because she was a big deal, like straight out the gate, and then she just like pops up as these tertiary characters, and I'm like, oh shit, Anna Paquin's there. Huh.
Yeah,
it was just weird.
I wasn't aware of that, and the only one I knew for sure was She's All That.
And she pops up in Almost Famous. Sorry, derailed us there.
Oh, well, it's no big deal. We're just talking about a musical interlude.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, that's how I interpret that.
Sorry.
That she's seeing herself around town because she's questioning her individuality, basically.
It was hard for me to pay attention to the story because I was trying to take. I feel like I should have watched this movie twice, you know, because I'm more or less paying attention to the animation, and I'm paying attention to the backgrounds and stuff like that.
Well,
That I was kind of losing the story a little bit, but
that happens. This director, Kyle, I can't emphasize enough. I love his style, but almost every story of his I've ever been exposed to, I don't think I've ever fully understood.
well,
because it's so much of the beauty of his work is look and feel. And they're very dialogue heavy, but it's always delivered in that way where it's like, we're not going to stop to actually tell it to you. We're not going to stop to explain it to you. If you figure it out along the way, great. But these characters are living their own lives, and it's up to you to keep pace.
And
so if you like this, I would definitely recommend watching some of his other stuff, because he really is a unique voice in animation or live action.
And you know that I like visually enticing movies, and I'll often ignore narrative just to focus on the visuals. I didn't mean to on this; it just kind of happened that way.
One of the first anime I was ever talking to you about was Pat Labor. It's a series of like TV shows and movies that it's like the brainchild of Mamoru Oshii. There's a trilogy of movies that I really wanted you to watch, like when we first started talking about movies and stuff, because to me it just seemed like a perfect fit. The reason why I haven't had you watch them though is because it's a trilogy, and it's a lot. Whereas Ghost in the Shell or something, it's an 83-minute movie. I think you can stomach it. It's not a huge investment up front.
No.
But the Pat Labor movies, I think, are my favorite of anything of his I've seen. But yeah, this montage, if you want to take like a 5-minute break to just see some beautiful images and hear some really trippy music, maybe look it up on the YouTube, because it's gorgeous. And then we cut to a blonde woman on the freeway, and she's naked.
I thought this was a real T-1000 moment, because she's blonde and she just like kind of pops up, and there's a truck coming basically, and I'm like, oh shit! I'm like, oh no, T-1000. And then I think I didn't realize that the truck driver hit her, because we almost immediately get to the scene where she's kind of mangled, and she's I guess in the police station, more or less, the police station laboratory.
This isn't the first time this happens in this movie, where something very important happens off screen, and I don't know. It's a directorial choice. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's effective. I guess it's economical, to be honest.
This is where live action trumps the where he's using live action to tell the story through animation, where this would be very impactful in a real movie, like I'm not in a real movie, sorry, live action movie, where if you were to have the same scene, Daryl Hannah pops up disheveled, pale, naked, and then you just see her, like, you just see lights on her, and then you just see her right in front of a truck. You can put together that she got hit, and then if you just cut to and then you go quietly to the slab where she's laying, you can put it together pretty quick. Her mangled robot body, like, oh, she got hit by the car, and now they're kind of trying to figure out where she came from. It doesn't really make sense here, because that jump cut isn't as effective here, is all.
I gotcha. But yeah, Section 9 recovered this blonde body. It's a cyborg body, by the way. And holy shit!
In case you didn't know.
When they put a current through it, when they try to activate it, oof. The animation here is spectacular, but it's also unnerving, because this is a view that we get of the human body that is very few people have actually seen what this looks like.
I'm gonna say that live action's Return of the Living Dead. Do you remember? You know what scene I'm talking about in Return of the Living Dead?
Yes.
It reminds me a little bit of that effect, where it's like, oh, whoa, that's a little unnerving there. But yeah, we were talking about like jiggling and how
physics.
This is physics. This is a very classy, this is like one of the classiest uses of nudity like ever. Is that she's naked. What's left of her? Both of her arms are missing, and they reactivate her, and she twitches and like almost like it's not even like a seizure. I don't even know how to describe it.
Well, it's an example of what happens when you put a current through like something that's dead, basically.
Yeah.
Like this is why I say this is unnerving, because the human body, when it's conscious, when it's alive, it fights against gravity, basically. Like there's a certain stance it takes, there's a certain form it takes. The way we move is very controlled in some instances. This is an example of an entirely limp body being like convulsing against its will.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they like had some sort of mannequins or like or cadavers or something that they're rolling around, but that's the only way that you can learn the physics of that, really.
I think if you were to take somebody getting the pads, the like defibrillator, yeah, I think that would be a good way to think about it, because that pushes the body in an unnatural way. So maybe if you just had that on a loop, like we just have to get that jiggle going, like get the body to move like that, to where that's what it kind of feels like, is a defibrillator doing it like several times back to back, which I don't think would bring you back to life if you try to do it to somebody.
No, I think that would double kill you.
Double kill. That's a double tap.
It's a Mozambique drill with some electrical pads. But yeah, it's very creepy. It doesn't help that her eyes are wide open the whole time, and it's exceedingly well animated. But yeah, Motoko comes in, and everybody kind of is huffy with her because she's late. And the boss storms out of the room. He's like, it's like, you could give us a call if you're going to be late. So apparently she's really fucking late. As it so happens, this cyborg body, Bato says, like, you're late, so I'll explain everything that we already know, so the audience can catch up.
That's useful. Okay.
Yeah, it is. It works because it sets a tone, and it effectively communicates what needs to be communicated. But he explains to her that a factory came to life on its own, so a factory that was not operating at that moment just sprung to life and manufactured a cyborg body. It escaped, and here we are. And there's a lot of repetition of it being a Megatech body. Megatech being the company that manufactured it. And apparently their security is like highest, like top men. So it's very strange that this would happen. That not only would the body be made by a factory without anyone knowing, but that it would escape. And there's a lot of discussion here about what to do with the body. And one of the doctors that they have on staff at Section 9 he's very flip about dissecting the cyborg body. He's just like, whatever. So like, you can tell that he's used to doing this. So he's not thinking of it as an organism or a person or anything living, really. It's just meat. And then Bato throws out there that he's heard of cyborgs having souls, by the way, and nobody seems to really pay much mind to that, but put a pin in that, I guess.
Well, is this where he says that this robot had a ghost in its brain, basically?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know I don't know why I like this, but when we have a movie title that we don't say in the movie, but we get really close to, like The Silence of the Lambs. Like, we know where that title comes from. It comes from Jodie Foster's story about the lamb screaming, and it's called The Silence of the Lambs, and it has significance to the story. Obviously, most titles do, but this one, it's like, he mentioned, Bato mentions to the major, he's like, you got something up with your shell, and he's talking about the, I guess, where her brain rests. They call the head the shell, and in this case, he's like, she's got a ghost in her brain, but we have to kind of equate the two, like, oh, there's a ghost in the shell. I just thought, I was sitting here like, I don't know why I like that. Just, I don't like it when they explicitly say the movie's name, the title name in the movie. It's kind of corny, really.
Well, see, I insist, if you are going to say the name of your movie, you need to look
directly at the camera.
Yeah, you need to look directly into the camera and say it.
The Hot Tub Time Machine does it. He literally does it. It's like
I've
some
seen
kind
the
of
trailer.
Hot Tub Time Machine. He
Hot Tub Time Machine
looks at the camera like, fucking stupid.
Well, not to completely derail us, but one of my favorite instances of that was from Channel 101. That would be the short internet film website that was founded by Dan Harmon. way back when I was in high school. There was a show called Dohar, Lord of Beasts, and at the conclusion of the first episode, there's this village chief that like hops into the frame, and Dohar just saved the day. So he's like, 3 cheers for Dohar! And then he looks directly into the camera, Lord of Beasts, episode 1. That's
Love
perfect.
Dan Harmon. Love Dan Harmon.
Yeah. I don't think he had anything to do with that episode or that show, but that website was his baby, and I'll forever thank him for that.
It's kind of like
funny you mentioned.
It's like he's kind of like Judd Apatow, where you see his name and if his name's on it, like, okay, I'll probably like this.
I mean, they did that with Quentin Tarantino and what's his face,
Robert Rodriguez.
Robert Rodriguez also, and the Bear Jew.
Oh, Eli.
Yeah, Eli Roth. They did that with him too, where they throw all 3 of their names all over movies that they had very little to do with. Like, my favorite example is Tom Yong-gung, the Tony Jaa movie. When they brought that over to the States and retitled it The Protector, Quentin Tarantino's name was all over that, and all he did was pay for it to come here.
Yeah,
he did nothing to make it. He just paid to have it brought here.
I don't trust anything with Quentin Tarantino's where it's like Quentin Tarantino presents or brought to you by Quentin Tarantino. Like, I'd rather just watch one of his movies.
The funniest one these days is from the producers of. You see that so often nowadays. There's like, from the people who paid to make that thing you liked.
Yeah, no.
Speaking of the title, actually the original Japanese title for this isn't Ghost in the Shell. It's
interesting.
Kokaku Kidotai.
Oh, that makes more sense.
Mobile Armored Riot Police, which has nothing to do with anything from a thematic standpoint. So I think that's a good change, actually.
It's an excellent change, actually.
Yeah, the Ghost in the Shell brand is very strong. That's a striking title. Ghost in the Machine, however, that didn't go anywhere. Although I think that movie's hilarious. So, at this point, Bato does mention, by the way, the majority of Section 9 employees actually have megatech bodies. So we're starting to play around in that territory of, like, individuality, where it's like, this just random body that some factory pooped out is actually like the same as most of your comrades and fellow employees, which is kind of a creepy thought. But yeah, there's a lot of terminology that gets thrown out here. Diving and swimming, for instance. So diving would be essentially intruding on someone else's consciousness, like entering their consciousness via like electronic communication of some sort. And swimming, Bato refers to the ghost that's inhabiting this cyborg body as essentially being trapped in there. So it's stuck in the robot brain. And it's unable to jump from place to place.
Yeah.
And then he also throws something out there that was kind of interesting. That, again, this was something I only caught this time, where he ruminates on the fact that, so me and the Major have cyborg brains, and they require regular maintenance, and that jerk fuck doctor who was just in there is the guy who's working on them every month or whatever.
Yeah.
Who's doing my oil changes, essentially. Like, are those people trustworthy?
Yeah, no kidding.
They're regularly fucking around in my brain. So you can tell that there's like a sensation of doubt. There's some doubt in the air.
I would actually feel less comfortable as a cyborg brain that works like a human brain. Somebody who's like, this person's less capable than I am to do maintenance on my brain. It should be another cyborg who doesn't get sleepy working on my brain, not this.
Well, yeah,
fuck.
actually, Aramaki responds to him and says, like, Bato's questioning him, and Aramaki is honest and says, like, actually, pretty much all the doctors we have here are straight up human. They don't have cybernetic implants. It's like, isn't that a concern? Are they that qualified?
I mean, if you have somebody who's human working on the cyborg, aren't you only as strong as your weakest link? Are you only creating cyborgs that are only as smart or only as capable as the human brain? Like, limiting them.
No, actually, the products you're making are far superior to you, which is kind of one of the themes of Blade Runner. And Alien Covenant and Prometheus, all that stuff.
And
all that
sci-fi.
Ridley Scott stuff,
Sci-fi.
and sci-fi in general.
Sci-fi in general.
I still need to see Transcendence because I've heard that movie's awful.
It's mind-blowing how bad it is. It's so
I know, but I
stupid.
want to see it because of that.
Yeah, you go for it, bro.
I'm not paying for it.
It's got our
if it's free, I'll watch it.
It's got our lady friend from the town that we're both big fan of. I can't think of her name. You know who I'm talking about, though.
I do. Shoot. Oh, fuck. What's her name?
I can't think of her name.
I always get it wrong because her name is like Rebecca, but then I want to put Black as the last name.
I want to say
it's not Rebecca Black.
When I hear Rebecca, I think De Mornay. Well, late 80s, early 90s Rebecca De Mornay. Not contemporary.
But yeah, she is quite fine.
Yeah, I like her.
Yeah, she works for me. And in fact, God damn it, Kyle, you gave me another excuse to watch that horseshit movie. But yeah, Motoko mentions while they're in the elevator another choice line that's very important. Maybe there never was a real me in the first place. So she's going down Goth Girl Avenue, and Bato's doing the guy thing where it's like, oh, no, that can't be true. Whatever. Whatever.
Whatever.
We got a really cool scene here that I don't know if you have any familiarity with the Metal Gear games.
I'm familiar with getting shot in the head at the beginning of whichever was the first iteration on the PlayStation, because I couldn't get past that first part. I'd play it at my cousin's.
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually the game I'm talking about.
Okay.
But it happens very late in the game. So Togusa is in the garage, and he gets passed when he's stepping out of the elevator by two guys in fancy suits, one of whom is a white guy, so you know he's suspicious right away.
Yeah.
So he sees two bougie cars in the garage, and him being a cop, does some clever deduction here where he's like, so there were two guys in suits. Why do we have two fucking limos in the garage? Like, they don't seem like guys who would drive themselves. There's got to be more to their party.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes through a number of steps here. He asks like the building computer to review the elevator footage of those two gentlemen stepping on the elevator. And then he doesn't see anything suspicious there, although he does note that the door takes like 3 seconds longer to close than it should. And then he also asks the computer to review like the pressure indication, like how much weight this elevator was carrying. And it's astronomically high. So him being not an idiot deduces that there were either cyborgs or there were more than two people in that elevator.
Well, there are definitely more than two, but yeah.
Yeah. And this sequence was borrowed in a Metal Gear Solid. There's a really great scene where you're in the middle of a radio chat with your buddy, and it actually gets interrupted by the fact that he notices that the elevator you're riding, like the overweight limit alarm goes off on it when you step onto it. Yeah. And it's this really cool suspenseful sequence where it's like, oh my god, there's a bunch of people with cloaking devices in there with you. You gotta fight them. And it sounds cooler than it is, but it's still cool. Then those two gentlemen enter the chamber where the cyborg body is being kept, and we get this really cool scene where the white guy, his hands explode open and turn into like 20 fingers on each hand.
It goes to each finger sprouts like 10 fingers, and then those 10 fingers sprout like 5 fingers, and then they all start typing. It's pretty
If you've
incredible.
ever seen like one of the trippy scenes in Doctor Strange with the hands, that's what it looks like. But basically, Dr. Willis here, the white guy, has cyborg hands, and he can type insanely fast.
Yeah.
It's pretty fucking cool to look at. But it's over the course of this conversation in the room with the cyborg body that we learned that the puppet master is confirmed to be confined within this cybernetic body. And Section 6 wants the collar, despite the body being housed at Section 9. Like we said at the very beginning of the movie, these two organizations are in conflict with each other. And through some sort of shenanigans, it's not entirely clear really, but basically we learned that Section 6 somehow forced the puppet master into this particular cyborg brain and body in order to isolate them, because otherwise they're basically just living on the internet and were free to navigate wherever they wanted. So it's not entirely clear how this happened, but it happened, so deal with it. And then we get a conversation with the puppet master. Do you recall some of the details that are traded here?
No, but I did like the little subtlety. While he's typing, it's clear that the cyborg is inanimate right now. It's not on. It's not moving. And as he's typing, you don't even see it like click on, but you see her eyes move. It's kind of like a little horror movie thing. Like it's just really subtle. I'm like, oh, that's nice. I'm like, okay, so it's on. I caught the name Project 2501. There's the name of this. I guess what he's naming the cyborg or whatever. I didn't catch everything. What all said here?
Well, it's a whole lot. So
I was gonna say there's a lot of dialogue.
There's a lot of dialogue in this movie. We're probably not doing a good job of summarizing, but I'll try. I probably missed a few things, but basically he declares himself an autonomous life form. He says, basically, I may be digital, like exclusively digital at this point, but then he throws back at the gentleman in the room that your DNA as biological beings is how your life propagates. And an external hard drive in a computer is very similar to that in terms of how digital information works, where we now have the capacity to transport just electronic information from place to place at will. So he says, despite I'm not biological in nature, he exists, he has memories, he has feelings, and he wants political asylum. And yeah, he says that my name is Project 2501, and I am a life form that was born in the sea of information. So basically, he's a computer program that gained sentience.
How?
So that's the question. There's no answer to it, but somehow it happened.
No, I said Hal, like Hal from 2001.
Yeah, he developed a sense of self and has self-preservation.
He's Skynet
instilled in him. Yeah, so much like Hal, who felt the need to defend himself, this is kind of where the puppet master's at. Many of the actions he's taking were to prevent himself from being lost or erased, because that's what life does. And then some explosions go off. By the way, the puppet master's speaking voice is distinctly male, despite the body being female.
That's true.
Put a pin in that. So explosions go off, and some well-equipped and cloaked people snatch the puppet master, the body, that is.
Yeah.
And Togusa actually tries to stop them. He fails. Good job. Good try, but it doesn't quite work out. His gun does nothing to their car, but he shoots a tracker onto their car. And so now our heroes are giving chase. And Motoko contacts Mr. Aramaki, and they go back and forth kind of untying this conspiracy. And she believes that Section 6 is responsible for the kidnapping, largely because of the equipment that they have. Because Togusa explained to her that, hey, these guys have like fucking cloaking gear on them, which is not something that your average criminal or whatever would be able to get a hold of. So she thinks that the conflict between their two organizations has escalated in some fashion. And then did you notice the cyborg ladies in the command center with the old man? Okay, so the boss, Mr. Aramaki, on a couple of occasions has this command center he goes to, and it's populated with nothing but cyborg hotties. It's a bunch of it's interesting because the first time we see them, there's like 3 of them, and they're just a bunch of young women dressed in like office attire, sitting at computer consoles with like headsets on, and they're just typing away and doing whatever he says. It's like a Bourne movie where the FBI director's shouting and people type stuff, and then spying happens. This time, though, we get a closer look, and we see that they're basically just like robot shells. So this is something I could see happening, where you have like a friendly human exterior to something that's essentially like a computer. It's
Yeah.
not a person so much as it is just a tool. So it performs a task that would normally be carried out by a person, but he's essentially directing traffic, and they just do whatever they're told. And we notice here from a couple of the close-ups, they don't blink. So they may have cute girl faces, but I wouldn't call them attractive.
No.
It's actually kind of repulsive and terrifying. But yeah, Dr. Willis and Nakamura from Section 6, they have a chat in their car while they're driving away from Section 9 after the explosions and stuff. And the main piece of information we learned from this conversation is that the kidnappers who have the Puppet Master body are changing vehicles. And then we get a musical interlude with Motoko, who is in a chopper, and Bato and Togusa in their cars, separate from each other, all trying to track down this vehicle carrying the cyborg body, and like the military cordoning off an area, and the hotties typing away with their cyborg hands. And is this where the shot that you wanted to ask me about happens, like in the city?
No, the one I was asking you about was the van one, about how they did the gunshots into the van.
Oh, okay. Because I thought you were talking about a shot that I noticed where it's the chopper circling a skyscraper. That the way it's lit makes me think it was maybe a CGI building. Not positive, but it reminded me of like early CGI and animation.
It is possible. I think I know which one you're talking about. I just figured since you said that there is CGI that pops up, I just assumed that. Yeah.
So then we get an awkward little sequence that it's informative, but kind of comes out of fucking nowhere. Where the guy with the beard who was with Bato earlier in the movie, he contacts Mr. Aramaki, and he explains to him that a gentleman by the name of Mizuho Daita, a programmer that was involved in the opening assassination, may have been involved in the creation of the Puppet Master. So this is where I guess we're supposed to be told that the opening sequence does tie into the Puppet Master conspiracy thing. And Beard Man surmises that the Puppet Master was a program that was created to influence diplomats that somehow gained sentience. And he just goes back into the internet, and it's actually kind of this cool thing where he like puts on like what looks like almost like a diving bell or something. It's like a big harness, and that's how he internets. And then we get the roadblock scene. There's some good violence here, Kyle. Basically, a couple of people that we believe are the kidnappers are in the same car that they escaped from Section 9 in. And then this roadblock pops up, and they crash into it, and Bato just like runs up to their car, and holy shit, he tears this one guy's chest wide open and puts a gun to the other one's head. So he's not fucking around. It's like he's Judge Dredding these guys, basically. But yeah, he tears the one guy's chest open. The other guy, apparently, they apprehend. But obviously, we, the audience, are aware that they no longer have the cyborg body. It was handed off to a different vehicle. So Bato's a little frustrated. And then we get, like, one of the cooler scenes in the movie, like, one of the more just, like, universally awesome moments in the whole fucking thing. Where Motoko catches up to the other car that actually does have the kidnappers and the cyborg body in it. And it's at an old, like, flooded metro station.
Mm-hmm.
And she knows something's up. So she jumps out of the chopper, which she can do because she has a cybernetic body. And she tells the chopper, like, okay, some shit's about to go down, but I want you to get out of here because it might be bad. And she infiltrates the flooded metro station. And there is a cloaked tank.
Yeah.
There's a camouflaged tank standing over the vehicle. And it starts shooting at her with essentially miniguns.
Yeah, this felt kind of like RoboCop here.
A little Ed 209-ish, yeah. But in response to this, she asks the chopper to shoot out the glass covering of the metro station, so like the ceiling. and all the glass fragments fall down onto the tank, thereby revealing it, like removing its camouflage. And then the chopper just kind of like leaves a little bit. So she commits to fighting the tank.
Yeah.
Her logic here is that she is desperate to quote unquote dive into the puppet master, so she wants to hook up her brain to the puppet master brain so she can communicate with it directly. And this is going to be her only chance, because more than likely the body's going to be taken away or destroyed, and no one on her level will get an opportunity to speak with this thing.
Yeah.
It'll become a higher up issue.
The sequence,
but yeah, just the nature of her committing to fighting this tank, like the combination of the music and the fact that she's like this slim form that basically has a suitcase with an assault rifle in it. And it's like, you're gonna fight that? It's kind of cool.
Something about this reminded me of the Batman the Animated Series. There's a lot of shadows in here, a little bit of the color palette. Like it's really dark. Yeah, this is a cool sequence, and I think she tries to like shoot into the top of the tank. Like she drops trow again and like jumps up on top. Oh yeah, I forgot about the dude with the glasses that just gets fucking just obliterated.
Grenaded, yeah.
Yeah. But she jumps on top of the tank, and the little eyes like, oh, where's she at? And she comes into frame, and this is where she hulks more or less. I don't know why. I don't know why her body changes though. That's the thing.
Well, I mean, it's so the choreography of the sequence is very precise, and it's very elegant actually, because it's so precise. It's actually very restrained. Basically, she's running from cover to cover. Her rifle is it doesn't have enough penetrative power to damage this tank. So she's just shooting at it more to like as a distraction and moving from cover to cover. She closes distance. She lobs grenades at it, mostly to kill the guy who's underneath it.
Yeah.
And then she drops trow because she has that thermal optic camouflage.
Yeah.
As we've seen before, she does that. So she uses that to close distance, and I think her rifle actually breaks down. Like the barrel melts, basically. Because the ammunition she's using is too much for it to handle or something, much like a real life like machine gun. And so yeah, she jumps on top of it and she hulks out, and it's my understanding that like our bodies produce like fatigue toxins, and they have limits. Like we have limits to how much we can function in certain regards. If your body was entirely artificial and was being driven by a computer or something, if you commanded it to exert itself to a degree far greater than it was capable of sustaining, if it doesn't have those barriers preventing it from pushing those limits, it just will go.
Yeah.
So it was my understanding that like her musculature and like the servos or whatever working her limbs, she just told them like go for it. So it was just kind of like she put forth more power than her body could sustain, which caused her to destroy herself.
Yeah.
Which is something a human can't really do unless they're particularly driven. But with her, again, the animation here is really incredible because it looks like, you can tell she's exerting herself, but at the same time you can tell that it doesn't bother her. It's like, okay, my limbs popped off.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh well, I tried. But yeah, there's some truly that really creepy physics animation happens here where we get to see her limp body just kind of like fall off of the tank.
Yeah, that was pretty
It's
neat.
like that. It's really well animated. And then the tank reaches forward and tries to crush her head, and more creepy imagery. It crushes her helmet, like that had the veil for her camouflage, and she's just kind of staring straight ahead, letting this happen because her limbs are gone.
Yeah,
but her face communicates no sensation of fear or pain, which again, I guess if you have a mechanical body and a mechanical brain of some sort, yeah, maybe she was incapable of expressing anything because I don't think her face moves anymore for the rest of the movie. But Deus Ex Giant Gun, Bato shows up with a giant gun that's probably as big as he is, and he shoots the fuck out of this tank and kills the pilot, and then it releases her.
Mm-hmm.
And then Motoko, with her body completely broken, she orders Bato to hook her up to the puppet master. Then cut to some choppers incoming. We get to see some supremely awesome military tech. Some choppers that sprout wings, which apparently is a thing that we actually are trying to do right now. I forget the term, but it has something to do with design mechanics emulating biological mechanics. So they actually are trying to develop planes now that have like feather-shaped wings.
Okay.
And that's what these choppers have. And then we get to hear some technical jargon being spoken back and forth between the people in these choppers, and it has to do with like snipers suspending their cardiovascular functions and synchronizing with the movement of the vehicle they're in order to get like 100% precise aim. It's like, yep, we're probably gonna get that at some point. It's like snipers who don't breathe and have like perfect motion control in their limbs. It's like, yep, we're gonna get that someday. But this is one of the most the scene like typifies Mamoru Oshii in so many ways, but it's also very frustrating because it's like 10 minutes long, and it's just two dead bodies talking to each other without moving.
Yeah, I didn't know what was happening. I was just
exactly.
Like, okay.
It's a lot, and I don't know how much I got out of it, but I know when I was very young, this scene was very frustrating. This would usually be where I would turn off the movie.
Yeah, I was partially checked out at this point. I'm like, all right, I got the gist. They're talking to each other, and she probably figures it out.
Yeah, basically the Bato hooks up the two of them. The puppet master explains that he was a program, been tasked with manipulating the ghosts of individuals for the benefit of specific persons and organizations, meaning exploited. He somehow gained awareness, and when his creators learned of this, they forced him into a body so he could no longer just hang out on the internet. Poor guy.
Yeah.
Puppet Master explains that he cannot die nor reproduce, and Motoko actually counters, like, but you can make a copy of yourself, right? And Puppet Master replies, like, well, a copy does not offer the possibility of individuality, which is, of course, the concept that Motoko's been grappling with since the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And she levels with him, and she's like, oh, you want the variety required to combat extinction, like the biological variety. And basically, it's a very long conversation, but at the end of the day, he wants to merge with Motoko, because they both have something that the other one does not, and it's Puppet Master's understanding that by becoming one thing, they will become something entirely distinct, like something that's neither one of them, but it's just unique.
Mm-hmm.
Which obviously individuality was something that she was desiring or questioning, and that would grant her that. So, of course, her ears perk up. Then I think the Puppet Master says, after the merging, you will bear my offspring to the net itself. Which I couldn't help but think of the fucking Lawnmower Man. I don't know if you've seen that, Kyle.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Fuck. You might have to watch the Lawnmower Man.
Mm.
It's not good. I don't know what it is about Jeff Fahey, but he has a lot of shit movies under his belt, but for some reason I get a lot of enjoyment out of watching them.
I've heard about Lawnmower Man.
I mean, you couldn't escape it in the mid-90s because, CGI was the thing.
Mm.
And virtual reality, you couldn't go to a fucking shopping mall without seeing like one of those like things that you stand on and you put on the helmet.
Mm-hmm.
Like virtual reality was a big thing, but it's a terrible movie. I get some level of enjoyment from it, so I might force you to watch that.
Yeah, okay.
And then basically this whole conversation ends with the snipers from the chopper blowing both Motoko and the Puppet Master body to bits. Bato loses an arm trying to block the path of the bullet, by the way. And there's Motoko has like a divine vision of some sort just before her head gets caved in by a bullet. I don't know what the I don't know what we were supposed to get out of that, but it was kind of cool looking. And then we get to the end of the movie. And do you recall what happened here?
She comes back as a little girl. Am I mistaken?
Yeah. Motoko. We get a very cinematic shot, like passing through a study. Motoko is like, well, it's not Motoko actually. It's a child in like a gothic dress of some sort, sitting with what looks like IVs hooked up to them, just eyes open, not blinking. And it looks like Motoko, like the face does, and has a similar haircut. And as it so happens, 20 hours have passed, and Bato somehow transferred Motoko's consciousness into this body. And she's like, what the fuck? Like, why would you put me in a little kid's body? And he's like, well, I had to act fast. This is what I got.
Yeah.
So it's a little weird, but she's speaking in a child's voice, but halfway through the conversation, I noticed that it changed back to her original voice. So I don't know if like she toggled some some settings in her cyborg brain or whatever, but it was kind of interesting. But yeah, we learned that basically the war between Section 6 and Section 9 ended in a draw, obviously. Like, it seemed pretty obvious that nothing was going to happen there. It's just a forever stalemate kind of situation. And yeah, apparently this merging was complete. So the Puppet Master and Motoko are inhabiting the same consciousness. They're one and the same. And she opts to leave. She's like, yep, I'm just going to leave. Going to go do my thing. Going to become a person. And she tells Bato that, like, let's have a password, 2501. Like, whenever we meet again, just keep your ears open for that number combination. Because as we're learning with this, well, as we've learned in this world, physical form doesn't have that much to do with actual personhood. Mm-hmm. So she could show up looking like Wilford Brimley tomorrow and say 2501 and be like, Motoko!
Gross.
Yeah, so there's no guarantee that she'll show up looking the same next time they encounter each other. But yeah, the last shot of the movie is her standing above a cityscape. It's a wide, expansive cityscape, and she says to herself, where shall I go now? The net is vast and endless. Credits!
Yeah.
And that was Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
So Kyle, what did you think of this one?
Yeah, great to look at. I like the idea of the story. Kind of get lost a little bit. I feel like the suits in this movie don't really affect the story too much. In my opinion, like they're just kind of there. They don't really move the plot along as much. But yeah, I liked looking at it, and I tried to pay attention as best as I could, but it was a little distracting. Matrix. If you've seen The Matrix, this would be kind of neat to watch because you can kind of see, like, oh, there's a little bit there, a little bit there. If you've seen Blade Runner too, like, I get a little bit, little hints here and there. And you can see that it probably was influenced a little bit by Blade Runner and definitely influenced The Matrix. But yeah.
Yeah, again, it's not exactly one of my favorite films, but it is gorgeous from an audiovisual standpoint. The themes are very, very strong. It's the kind of stuff that gets you thinking. But in terms of like characters and drama, there's honestly not a whole lot there. There's not a whole lot to grab onto. Like the Major and Bato. Like Bato seems like a cool guy. That's about the extent I can say of him. The Major, same deal. It's like she's weird. So, she's not terribly relatable. She's just kind of strange and has a relatable conflict, but as a person, even she isn't sure if she's a person. So it makes it difficult to relate to on that level. But the sequel, I've seen it at two very different stages in my life, and I feel like I have very conflicting opinions of it. I'm not sure if I like it or not, but it continues to explore very, very interesting themes, much like The Matrix. I think it came out in like 2004, so this would be maybe even after the Matrix sequels came out. It explores the concept of like reality and perception and things like that. Very it's a very challenging movie in a lot of ways, and I'm not sure if it's in the good way or not. But again, audiovisual, great. But yeah, I'm glad you got something out of this one. Like I said, though, it's certainly not a personal favorite of mine. So I'm glad we got a decent conversation out of it, because there is certainly a possibility that we would not have.
Yeah.
But yeah, for next week's episode, I'm not positive because I'm trying to do these in chronological order, and both of the movies that I had in mind for next week both came out in 1997. So I'm not sure which one should come first, but I was thinking either Hayao Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke, because I don't think it's fair to have a conversation about anime without exploring some of his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one would be Perfect Blue, which I think you might get a lot out of.
Okay.
But we'll figure it out by next week. So for now, though, it's going to be a either or. That being said, thank you so much for joining us as we caught up on cinema. Tune in next week.
Yeah.